What's happening, guys? I'm Dan. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for clicking on the video. We got a pretty special one that I was able to get my hands on. Didn't think I was going to get any of the variants, but here we are breaking down Goose Island Bourbon County brand stout variant. It's going to be the backyard stout. Originally, I believe there was a version of this that was brewed back in 2013, released into distribution. I believe it was aged in rye barrels, so did not have it back then, but that is a little bit of the history on this. This one is not going to be the rye barrels, just going to be the typical oak barrel, and we have a stout aged bourbon barrels with mulberries, boysenberries, and marionberries. Very strange, very odd duo of berries going on there. Obviously not your typical everyday berries that you buy at the grocery store. But that's just what these guys have done over the years, and they continue to go with that old recipe and use those fruits. So this is 12.9% ABV, a little bit lighter than the version that I got of the base stout. That was 14.1. I saw that some beer tubers were reviewing a Bourbon County that was 14.6. Mine was 14.1. This one is 12.9, so a little bit lighter. Also, this was bottled back in October, so a little bit fresher than the original base that I had, and this is actually going to be less than 2 months old, so it doesn't matter. We have another one that we are going to age, so boom, gave one to my brother-in-law as well. And I will say, guys, the variants, you're gonna pay for them in Northern Michigan, and this was like $24.99, so I'm just gonna throw that out there. In retail locations in Northern Michigan, you're gonna pay $23 to $25 easily, maybe even more. So in Chicago, these are much cheaper. They're readily available. For some reason up here, it's like liquid gold. So I will say, I've never had any variants, so this will be my first, I believe, unless I had it on tap somewhere. But here we go. So you can age this for 5 years. It does the same thing as it always says. And let's get into this one. So this is scary because it's a bigger beer, and I'm going to go ahead and try and drink this today. A lot of smoke coming off the top, and as I pour it, more of the brownish color, and I see a little bit of crimson red, a little bit of that reddish tinge going on inside of that darkness. But again, pouring a little bit lighter. A little bit of cola going on, but again, a little bit more brown, a little bit of mahogany red, crimson red, whatever you want to say. That's what I saw as I poured it, and you're going to see those at the edges of the glass as well. Not as midnight oil as the original base. Nice little bit of mocha head sitting on top, a little bit of reddish tinge in that brown as well, and it's hanging on pretty well, sliding down the glass. We won't go into too much detail. I did smell some fruitiness as I poured it out of the bottle into the glass. Let's get an official aroma, guys. Let's see. This is interesting. A lot of guys I feel like wouldn't like fruity stouts. It's not always the case for me. I like fruity porters. I like a little bit more depth in stouts and porters than maybe average Joe does. But I'll investigate. Never had this, obviously. So let's go in. That head retention basically gone. Left with that little outer ring. Let's go to an aroma. Ooh. Man, so the first thing, it smells sweet and desserty for one. First thing that comes to mind is like raspberry or cherry pie. Bourbon County itself is always dark fruit heavy, very abundant in the fruit category for being a big stout. But it's no different here. I'm getting a ton of sweet berries, but even more so, right? So I usually get this fig slash date, right? Plums maybe. This one is just a burst of sweet fruit. Very abundant in this beer. Wow. It smells just so desserty. It smells like a cherry Danish. It smells like a raspberry pie. It smells like mashed up fruit preserves rather. And then you have some nice coffee notes, light roast. A little bit of dark roast as well, I'd say. A little bit of cocoa powder. Caramel toffee, that little touch of caramel that I got in the base. I'm certainly getting it in this as well. And just again, that Tootsie Roll thing in there with just a little bit more fruitiness. Maybe a little bit less roast in this. Maybe a little bit more sweetness. To be expected, actually, from the ingredient list here. So, I don't know. Those are my first impressions. I'm not really going to try to make this a 15-minute video, so I'm going to dive in, guys. Bourbon County. It's the variant. Backyard Stout, baby. 2023. Cheers. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Very sweet. It does collide with a little bit of barrel. I could see how originally maybe like a rye barrel would be a good idea in this beer. I mean, just off first impressions, I feel like some of that rye char kind of spiciness could offset the sweetness in a really nice way. This one I feel like is not as offset by that barrel. I'm not getting as much barrel as I'd like to offset some of that sweetness, but those are just my first impressions, and we'll dive back in. Raspberry preserves, apricot preserves comes to mind immediately. A raspberry pie, a little bit of cocoa powder, a little bit of caramel, milk chocolate, and light roasted coffee, very light roasted coffee. So not really an espresso, none of that going on in here. I would say it's more of this light roasted coffee outshined by fruitiness. That being said, it's very fruit forward based on the ingredients. I suppose I should have expected that. But for me, I think it is quite sweet, and I want a little bit more barrel, and I could see again where the original recipe of that rye barrel would come in handy to offset some sweetness. This one, not as roasty and dry as I'd like for my palate, but this is my first go at a variant, so maybe sometimes that's just how these beers are. I mean, that's kind of the point of the recipe, to change the base, turn it into something else, and they've certainly done that with this recipe. Still that Tootsie Roll, this raspberry coated Tootsie Roll. I get like notes of jammed up blueberries, some smashed up blueberries. It's very desserty. It's very desserty, and as I drink it, I'm getting a little bit more of the barrel. There's this slight like sour tartness affiliated in this fruitiness as well. It's not like it's sour, but it's just got this soft tartness that kind of edges out that barrel as well, and it kind of is deep underneath those fruity notes. It's well incorporated into that fruit as well, and I think when I'm picking things apart here, I want a little bit more barrel. So this is 12.9%, so I guess not as heavy as the other, but it still seems like I want maybe a touch more body, maybe a little bit more barrel spice or heat coming out to kind of offset some of the sweetness going on. So off of where I'm sitting right now, do I like this more than the base? No. I don't, because again, if you watch this channel and you know me, guys, this is all personal. It's not a dig at Goose Island or anything. I typically like roasty dry stouts, so this one is definitely leaning away from my cup of tea. My preferred palate is kind of the other end of the spectrum. With that all being said, is this good still? Absolutely. It's very good. It's a different pace for me than I, typically like to drink in these big beers. Still getting raisins, still getting dates. I get a lot of like tart cherry and tart raspberry. Again, this Danish raspberry cherry pie Danish thing going on, fresh from the bakery case. That's in here. There's a small bit of milk chocolate. Again, light roasted coffee, very light, almost non-existent because it's the sweetness overshines it. And then the barrel, I want a little bit more barrel. This is very subtle compared to the other. So with all that being said, guys, this is still great. It's smooth. It's pretty easy to drink. It's just a little too sweet for me, if I'm being all completely honest with you guys. So super drinkable still, but in my humble opinion, this could wear down my palate with taking this glass down and then trying to finish off that bottle. So as for rating, I'm going to go with a 4.25 out of 5. It's still awesome. It's still a crazy Bourbon County variant. It's cool. But again, the price is pretty nuts, and for my palate, it's a bit sweet. So that's where I'm sitting. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's been the 2023 Backyard Stout from Bourbon County. And I feel like if you age this, it's just probably going to get sweeter. So we'll investigate this later down the road. Over and out, guys. Cheers.